All right, welcome everybody. It is December 14th. This is the 12th week since EOS independence and the last roundtable for the year. We're going to take a short break for the holidays. So for anyone watching the recording, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, whatever you celebrate. Enjoy the time with your family and friends, and sit back and relax and have one more peek into the world of the node operator. Last week we talked about, it was part 2 of the Prometheus exporter stats conversation. We went through an old Matthew request, an old GitHub issue that Matthew had submitted, a bunch of wish list, we can call it, things we'd like to see data from Prometheus. And we identified what we thought could be the low-hanging fruit that can happen at the node level versus perhaps more long-term needs to happen at the chain level. I don't know if there's anything left we want to wrap up on that conversation before we move on to the next topic. I know Matthew mentioned maybe there's some value in having a quick peek over it, but I think the main topic for today will be we had talked about talking about the Antelope resource model. We have decided instead, more timely and more suitable for the audience we have today on the call, to discuss some of the issues that are happening with congestion on the WAX network, and maybe some opportunities to either improve the way we configure things or make some changes to the Antelope software. So yeah, before we move on to that, is there any quick things we want to wrap up on this last week topic, or anything that came out of the discussion yesterday that maybe led to any features being identified or anything like that? Maybe there's an update from Stephen there.
So I don't believe that there's any explicit update around these requirements. I know that, of course, Kevin has had exposure to these discussions, and OCI is the team that's working on capturing some of these metrics. I think that we're still in the space where I think some of these attributes are being captured, but we've not really mapped out where all of these will land on a timeline just yet, or which will actually be like delivered in, let's say, like the March, April release sort of timeline. Kevin, I don't know if you have any latest or greatest there. Just I wasn't on the last OCI call that we synced up on. I don't know if you have any other updates related to this.
No, we're kind of finalizing the framework, if you will, and then adding in some of these reporting. You know, we're trying to do the trade-off between performance and granularity of reporting. So a number of these things we discussed internally, decided that we should do it like on every block as opposed to like every time it's updated. For example, the unapplied transaction queue, instead of like updating it every time the queue is added or removed the transaction, we're just going to do that for every block. And so I think that may be true for a number of these reporting things that we'll report them at a granularity of a block level, just because of we don't want to have the performance impact of tracking it at a finer grain level. So,
so Kevin, I missed the meeting last week. Sorry, guys, but is it going to get its own threads? It's going to get its own process.
It is, but even with it having a separate thread, there, you know, you've got a contention of updating those values. So you might think, well, it's just an addition; it's not that much, but it's an atomic addition, which is a memory barrier. So you know, we want to be mindful of any performance impact there. So that's the sort of thing we're kind of like thinking through and going to begin testing soon as well, just in terms of making sure there's no performance degradation by adding all this instrumentation.
Once per block is totally way more than enough anyway. So it's not like
Yeah.
Well, that was my thought.
calling the Prometheus metrics every half a second. So
It's pretty too much. Is it?
exactly. I mean, every 5 seconds or something is probably more than
Probably
enough.
better. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good feedback. Yeah, I'm glad I mentioned that. Yeah, to normalize that thought process there. That was my thought as well. It's like, hey, let's not go overboard here. We don't need to.
Yeah. Maybe
Down the
twice
road.
around every 6 seconds.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Good, cool. All right, making some progress on the requirements there. Any
Twice around
other?
would be every 3 seconds.
Sorry, what, Michael?
Twice around would be every 2
Yes,
seconds.
yes, Michael, you are correct.
Just wanted to clarify that, so.
Okay. Once around.
Do you guys have everything you need from the folks on this call, or is there any other feedback you're looking for, or any comments from anyone on this topic before we move on?
I mean, I guess my comment is I'd like to hear from Brian what he actually captured from last week. I guess there's some meeting notes somewhere, but when he's back,
Sure. Yeah.
we can get
Maybe we can get
the GitHub issue list with the takeaways so we can review. I guess
Sure.
because one thing I'd like to add, which wasn't discussed last week, is head block drift, which is current time minus block time, which gives you a nice, easy way to calculate whether the node is on time or not.
But won't it use its local time to check that, which is ultimately the problem to begin with? Or could you have it pull an external NTP, I guess, but
No, I'm not doing anything, just current time from the system clock. This is way, for better or for worse, this is the way diffuse calculates things. So it makes it very easy to generate a nice chart in Grafana. Are we on time or not? It's just
Would that be done at the node level? Do you know?
Yeah, it's a node statistic. It's just
I don't guess I've ever had it not be on time. Its time was wrong, therefore it wasn't on time with the rest of the world, but
well, yeah, that
doesn't.
That happens too. But if you stop syncing blocks from the network, then this time goes off.
I got you. Just that's not
or if there's a block producer not producing blocks,
correct.
this time also
Correct.
goes off because you got 3 seconds with no block.
Correct. That does not detect a coma. That's actually
it
what
does not
my
detect a coma.
monitors.
No.
I did monitor that head drift, and when a stale producer yourself keeps throwing bad blocks out there and they're getting accepted, the head block moves, but the lib never does. But
yeah, so
I see.
You could also add the lib block offset if you like.
Lib offset.
Right. So current time minus lib time. That would fix your problem, Michael.
Correct. And I mean, do you need it to actually do that calculation? It already provides head block time and lib time. I mean,
yeah, but how do you get the current time in
get time?
No, but as you're doing a Prometheus calculation, Prometheus doesn't have.
Oh, I do it on the
time.
collection, so it's fine. I mean, I just wonder. I'm trying to think of raw data points, but yeah, I mean, to have it automatically do the calculation is better, and you just get handed raw data.
Yeah, and then it's very easy to generate an alert in Grafana. If more than X seconds, alert, done.
Okay, so we added a couple more to the wish list. We got some feedback on timing. Cool. Last call for comments on that topic.
I'd like it all rolled into a get info 2. I know we keep talking about Prometheus, but if you're already calculating it, it'd be nice if you could get it in like a JSON, because not everybody uses Prometheus's format. Just a thought.
That old chestnut.
Just last 2 weeks ago was a
Yeah.
wish list.
Well, if you're already doing the work, like I say, I mean, not to build something separately with it, but if it could be incorporated to where you could poll it, if it's already somewhere out there, there's a lot more people that could use that.
Okay. Then let's move on now. Wax network congestion. Is there anybody who can frame up that conversation?
Before we get there, does Stephen have any updates on usual stuff?
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in. Thanks. So we had mentioned previously that we were targeting this previous Monday for a CDT release. Chatted with Bucky some, and we're targeting to get that out today. There's not a lot of meaningful changes between this and the previous RC. We're pretty much just going final. So that we'll be targeting to release that probably in the afternoon today, just trying to get everybody lined up, but that's what we're shooting for. Don't have a clear timeline on Dune just yet, but that's just not something that we're handling as urgent or critical just in the time that we're entering for the season. But we are working on getting that polished up. We may be able to even release that today, depending upon if there's any additional commentary there. We just haven't crossed that bridge just yet. And regarding a 3.2.1 patch release, we're presently not planning a patch release at this time. However, there's been some discussion about basically, I think Kevin helping support a potential patch release for Wax, given that they're the ones that are being impacted by the one issue that was kind of helping perhaps justify a patch release. We're working on trying to figure out just kind of what the scope of work is for a more elegant solution to that to work into a future release, but we don't have a timeline for when we would actually want to get that fix in and released through our primary repo of Leap.
So you're targeting Wax specifically, that's what I heard.
We expressed the willingness to support Wax in performing a release, given that it seems like that's where the focus needs to be. And we're not focused on getting this release out for Antelope proper, if you will, just because I think that we would like to have a more comprehensive solution in place than what we would do as a patch per se.
Okay, cool.
Is it still accurate? This was last week. Still,
yeah, that's what I was saying is I don't
week?
actually have a timeline for Dune
Okay.
right now. I'll chat with Bucky about this today, but really the holdup there, of course, just with the way that Dune is designed right now, is for CDT to go final. That's like the real blocker around it, since it still has that version dependency. We're working on getting rid of that. We just haven't yet, so that's kind of the blocker on that front. But I don't think that there's a lot of additional work that's going into Dune right now that needs to get out or anything. It's just waiting for this to go final.
Okay.
CDT does.
And on this, this is an old one that we had talked about a few weeks ago, a document on how crypto extensions inside CDT to utilize crypto primitives host functions.
Yeah, I know that Lynn had made some, one of our teammates, Lynn, had made some progress on this. Let me tap him on the shoulder as well. He's going to be helping with the tagging of this release. And I don't know if he finalized all of the documentation there, but we'll make sure to share it out once we do have it. I think that it's close. I don't know that it is finalized, but I will provide an update in the channel, the Telegram channel for this.
Great. And system contract updates still.
Not a rush
Not in a rush, but on.
So no update. Yep.
Cool. Cool. Anything else?
That's it for now. Yep.
Right. All right. Back to EOS network congestion. Anyone who's been participating in the troubleshooting there want to maybe frame up what you're seeing?
I don't know, I can try.
It broke.
Yeah, so it seems like somewhere in the Wax ecosystem, there's some incentives for people to try to submit lots of transactions to the network, which tend to fail at the block producer node. This causes a lot of congestion in the fact that lots of failed transactions, or things get in the queue, things pile up. And Node EOS is busy processing all these transactions and doesn't, blocks don't get propagated quickly, or the valid transactions don't get propagated, and we end up with blocks with not very many transactions in it. So there's a few different things that are as outcomes. So I guess blocks get missed, which causes more forks. Blocks are empty. And it gets into this kind of tailspin, because the more things that don't get in blocks, then the more things pile up. So then the more things that don't get in block, whatever. So
And then things expire. That was another thing we really ran into.
Transactions, So Node EOS performs well, and then the transaction goes up. It's still fine, and then it gets to some tipping point, and then bloop, everything falls apart. And the current solution is, well, either we can have that resource model discussion, which we're not having here, or really it seems to be tuning some smart contracts on the chain helps improve the list of transactions that fail, so that the problem tends to go away, which is the current situation right now. The Wax network is not having this problem where transactions are getting lost and whatever. So this problem has occurred, I don't know what, 3-4 times over the last 2 months?
Three big times, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, it's occurred and been growing up in its maturity for years. I mean, we've seen this on other EOSIO chains. They just haven't crippled it to the point because it wasn't the same incentive behind
not
it.
as busy.
But I mean, I more look at it and you say, yes, the resource model, helps contribute to the problem. But if the core resource model of EOSIO, Antelope, even previous models contains that, you have the option to change it if you want, but you still have to account for. And the way it works is, if it's public and anybody can create their own contract, they can really kind of exploit it, So if you look at the LEAP product as the actual product, not just the current resource model of EOS or Wax or whatever. I mean, Proton has a whole different model, but it's still based upon it, and any other private chain would have the same potential
there's a few
bottlenecks.
There's a few things that were proposed to change in LEAP itself, which is pass blocks along faster without doing full validations. There was applying the 3 strikes rule to all transactions. Not just on block production, but in general, when it hits any node. And there was another one about validating failed transactions somewhere as well. I think I don't remember. I'm looking at Kevin. He probably can't see that I'm looking at him, but
I think there was also maybe a
the
cap.
details.
There might have been a cap to the unapplied queue.
Yeah, exactly.
That allowed it not to overflow, which would still allow.
So once you get a certain amount of CPU or transactions or bytes in the queue, then start just dumping things rather than trying to queue them up. Yeah, that was another one.
Correct.
And I missed your first one there, Matthew.
Oh, go ahead.
The first one was pass the blocks along without doing the transaction level validation. So that way, if Node EOS is busy, it can get the block to the next block producer. So we avoid the forks, or we try to avoid the forks.
Yeah, but I mean, I thought the bigger problem was the 0 blocks. It was just, it would spend all of its time wasted and then say, oh, deadline for the block exceeded, out when a 0 or a 1 transaction block, more so than when they got heavy and they forked out. I mean, that was kind of the natural result for producer A didn't do it. So producer B started getting 8,000 transaction blocks trying to smash through it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a definitely cause and effect here, but
Yeah.
if we can fix the effect easily, then it's a valid, potentially valid mitigation. So like, this is not the only time we've seen these kinds of issues, right? So
Yeah,
like,
definitely related to the overall forking aspect of things. Yeah, if that's just kind of a
So-
general propose.
As usual, when you find a problem, there are multiple fixes to be done, right? So we fix this and fix that and fix that. So I think that's why I was trying to list all the potential, I think we came up with 4 that would, partially or fully address the problem. I don't know if this fully addresses the problem. I'm not sure we've actually seen the full extent of it. But yeah, Michael, as you mentioned, we've seen these sorts of problems going back to more than 2 years ago. That first happens on EOS.
Yeah, what'll happen is
we're doing this.
people will flood out in some way or another, kind of trying to front run, so to say, it's not true front running, but trying to manipulate how they get processed, when they get processed, and even finding ways to daisy chain, almost like a coin on a string, where they can send it down the pipe, but then snatch it back out of the vending machine and still cause problems, right? And
Yeah.
it really kind of left us with very little insight into it. I mean, logging JSON, spewing out a gigabyte a minute works. Watching the matrix scroll by,
Well,
or
actually,
having some caps.
It doesn't actually work doing all the logging, because I asked Kevin, like, why is my node busy with other time not processing successful transaction or failed transaction? And Kevin came back with, well, your node is busy doing logging.
Logging, yeah, you're logging 8,000 pages a minute, and the
Right,
logging was
so-
spewing out all these failed transactions that it was failing. I mean, I get why, but
Yeah, I mean,
back to that atomic.
That is part of the problem there. It looks like, you're doing Gelf logging there, and that's particularly heavy. It's a network call, and there's a lot there. I mean, we have on our list of things to do to put in a different logging framework. I think we'd look at introducing a logging framework that would do that on a separate thread. Currently that's all on the main thread. All logging's on the main thread. Gelf logging, all of it's on the main thread. So it's pretty expensive when you start logging every single transaction. It adds up. If you saw it, like, it took pretty much equal amount of time for the login as it did actually processing the transactions. For pretty close, at least in terms of like the time you're spending doing that. So yeah, there is that. I mean, that's certainly something we could do. Either we could move our existing Gelf logging into a different thread, or better yet, just move to a different logging framework that already has that capability as part of it. So the second one there, the apply 3-strike rule, that's actually in 3.2. It's not in 3.1. So that's a distinction between 3.1 and 3.2. And so, one of the things is to encourage everybody to move to 3.2 in the WAX environment, specifically to help that. The first option in evaluating passing the blocks along quicker, we've talked about that internally, and I think there was agreement that yes, we should just do that, and it's actually not a difficult change. However, by digging into that, discovered that even if that was in place today, the situation we're seeing would actually not help, I don't think, because that still requires accessing the main thread, and the main thread is busy during this time frame, so that you wouldn't actually get access to it to pass that block along any quicker than it currently is. It'd still be a little bit quicker, but it'd still be delayed by hundreds of microseconds. And so we're currently working on a fix for that right now. That would either way, even without the pass along the blocks quicker, to actually interrupt the main thread during this processing, so that we can then process the block. So currently what happens during speculative block execution today when a block is extremely busy and it has a lot of queued up transactions is it starts a block and it doesn't give up that main thread until it gets out of that start block, which can be depending on your configuration for your CPU effort. It can be 400 milliseconds or even full 500 milliseconds, typically 400 milliseconds of time that node is not available to propagate blocks along. And so it has to get out of that time frame to then propagate the next block. And so there's that delay there, and that's at every node. And so as a block, as the environment gets very busy, a block start not propagating as quickly as they should. And so then, you know, that aggregates forking, which then of course aggregates the whole thing again. So we're working on a fix for that. We're hoping to get that out into a release soon. And I think that will have actually a very big impact on the situations you're seeing in terms of like the additional forking and some of the empty block stuff. Now,
Daniel, can you add that point to the list? Sorry.
so
That's is that a new thing, proposed change to add, or is that a related to this pass the block?
it's pass all the blocks along quicker. It's just we found another issue where, yeah, we need to be passing the blocks along quicker. We're not. So yeah,
It's pass. It's interrupt the current execution of the speculative block to pass the pending block faster.
yes, yeah, that's it exactly. So
call it the smart interrupt or something catchy.
I think
Kill.
from what I'm seeing in the logs, I think that will make actually a huge difference under congestion. It actually makes, you know, and it's always been this way. Like we've just never noticed this because we haven't had
this many transactions. Kevin, these features that they're enabled just by running the latest version. For instance, the 3 strikes. If I'm running 3.2, I don't have to enable it. It's just there.
That's correct. Now it is configurable. You know, the 3-strike rule, we call it 3-strike rule because it used to be hard coded. It's now configurable. Even in 3.1, it's configurable. But in 3.2, it's applied to speculative blocks as well. But you can increase 3 to a larger number or a smaller number.
Okay. But if you just had to, like, it's blanketly out there by default.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, cool. All right, cool. Yeah. And you would expect that the new smart bypass will also be by default.
Yes, yeah, it will. That's just the way it'll work. There'll be no configuration option for that.
Yeah, cool.
That's the way it should have always worked. It's just something we've just never really noticed before. Because it only, you know, exhibits itself under high load, and so we just didn't ever realize that was happening. So
cool.
So yeah, I think that'll help. The other issue which Michael was talking about was the fact that, you know, people are targeting block production time for transactions and they're failing there, which was what the original 3-strike rule was put into place for. You know, they're now, that's happening across many accounts. So the subjective billing will kick in there. It's just that a lot of these counts have a large amount of subjective billing. And so it takes a while for that subjective billing to kick in. And then that takes us into the resource model conversation. So, you know, ultimately, you know, you can say that these guys are paying to run these, you know, we're subjectively billing them for these failures today even. And so, you know, it's just the fact that
they're paying for them.
Yeah, which,
so
you know, you could argue is valid, you know, it's not ideal.
Which is why I more go after the tools to be able to, you know, as operators manage it, obviously mitigate it if we can, but you know, I mean, yeah, you get enough CPU, you can just start smashing through any barriers or billing levels to the point where, you know, things have to kind of have certain thresholds. Anyway,
Yeah.
Anyway, so
And some of that you can, we could talk about blacklisting or alternative three-strike rule implementations. I know some of you guys during these big hits were playing around with, blacklisting some stuff to just allow some other transactions to make it in. Like currently the three-strike rule is according to account. You could look at a three-strike rule that is according to contract and action or something along those lines, in terms of when you discover that, hey, this particular action on this particular contract is failing like always during this block production, maybe I should just quit trying those, but that's obviously that's not great. I mean, even the three-strike rule is not great in terms of like, fairness, if you will. So I don't know, but those are things we could discuss and talk about as well.
So before we move on, so I heard like 2 specific recommendations for the existing wax block producers, which is upgrade to 3.2, and 2, make sure you have subjective billing turned on your block producer node, not just your relay nodes or API nodes or whatever.
Most important on the relay nodes, actually.
But some transactions only fail on the block producer, right?
That's true, but you get if you have subjective billing, the way that works on a relay node is you're subjectively billed for a transaction as it flows through a relay node, and that's not credited back to you until you see it into a block. So if a transaction flows through relay mode, you get subjectively billed for it. If it fails on the block producer, it will never come into a block, and so you've billed for it on a relay node.
Okay.
I don't
So
know,
yeah,
I'm still,
most importantly on the relay nodes.
And then subjective billing is I don't know what you call it. It's like inverse. Disable subjective billing false. It's like an
double
it's like an
negative.
HP, it's like an
Yeah.
HP switch. It's
Yeah,
like,
unfortunately,
Yeah,
when
no
that
shutdown.
was first introduced, it was defaulted the other direction, and so yeah, unfortunately, it's a little.
I'm still wrapping my noodle around that. I think is the idea you had said is maybe a node not subjectively billing off of the authorizing account or the paying account, but more tracking the contract. Is that what I kind of heard? Is that,
Yeah,
you're
not
failing
subjectively
this
billing.
contract and ultimately starting to blacklist it maybe dynamically for, strike rule to say,
so-
I'm seeing you cross the threshold of 50 failures in a round, therefore optionally a node operator can say, if you start detecting that, stop processing those to allow other potential non-spam contracts or 500 failures or whatever it is. I mean, you would pick off those dexes, those would get pretty hurt pretty quick, but I'm trying to wrap my head around. Is that what you were saying? Is looking at it as the action level versus the authorizer level?
Yeah, so currently the three-strike rule works like this. So, right, you start a block and you start processing transactions. And if you look at the authorizer, the first authorizer on a transaction. And if that, by default, it's 3. If that authorizer has 3 failed transactions in a block, as you're processing block, you say, oh, okay, it failed 3 times in this block. Then what happens is the three-strike rule kicks in. And so if that authorizer is seen again during that block, this is all during a single block production. During that block production, if you see that authorizer again, you say, you know what? You've failed 3 transactions in this block. I'm not going to give you another chance. So I immediately fail that transaction. And then you go on to the next one. And if it's that authorizer again, well, you immediately fail it. If
Correct.
you go to the next guy and it's
But you're chasing
authorizer.
every one of those bots, as opposed to a lot of them were all calling the same root malicious contract. If you looked at it and subjected it from the action side, that might give you Because otherwise you're just whack-a-mole. I mean, that's why my logs are so slam full, is 500 bot accounts all tried the same, doing the same
Yes.
thing. And they just spin up more and do them again. But if you
Right, so
can target it. Go ahead.
Right, so what I suggested as an alternative, potential alternative there is that you could, start processing the block and say, you know what, I'm seeing a lot of asserts and it's the same contract, it's the same action. It's different for authorizers in this case, but I say, hey, you know what, this action on this contract, it seems to be failing, maybe every time or certainly many times. And at some point you could say, oh, okay, you know what, this has failed too much, either in terms of count or in terms of time, if you want to do it in time, like we talked about changing the 3-strike rule to be time-based as opposed to count-based. But either way, you can make some determination about, hey, this particular action, this particular account, I have determined is failing too much right now. Now, the question would be, what do you do? For first authorizer, what we do is we immediately start dropping those transactions. They don't get another chance. You could do that, right? You could say, well, you know what? We're done with this contract in action. Any more I see on there, I'm just gonna immediately fail them and not do anymore. Or you could skip them with the idea that, well, we'll try again next block and see how it goes. Meanwhile, I'll look for something else that's not this contract and not this action that I can try to execute instead. But those are sorts of things that we could potentially do.
But I guess you could create a denial of service situation where I deliberately try to fail a contract that's legitimately doing other things, but I always make it assert. So then I could get it blocked. So that doesn't,
yeah,
it seems
that's
like we need a bit more
doing,
protection than just the account-based one, right?
Yeah, that's the problem with that, because I mean, authorizer makes sense. Like, someone has signed this thing saying, hey, this is me, and you can make determinations there. But yeah, you make an extremely good point about if you do it by contract in action, because then what someone can do is like they can take advantage of that, and they can basically shut down all activity on that action, which you could argue is in some of these cases their goal anyway. And so
Isn't that what they're doing right now? They're crippling all contracts.
Yeah, but I'm just looking for a legitimate case where a contract might assert.
I agree.
Somebody now is exploiting that to create a different problem.
And that's why I try to wrap my head around. I like the idea because you're not whacking the moles. You can more target and make it more expensive of picking up the contracts and not just a fleet of accounts. But yes, I mean, there is a danger. I mean, maybe a whitelisting ability, to at least be like, look, we know that this account is getting exploited. Stop, billing it at the action level, so to say. But I don't know. That's why I was kind of trying to think about it. I was like, I like that next level of control, optional, obviously, as needed. But yeah, I mean, it could be exploited. But what that allows you to do is take out one contract, whereas right now they're just taking out the whole chain. I mean, it's just backlogging everything behind it. So it's at least
but you can already manually blacklist a contract, right?
Yeah, but you have to know it's a whack-a-mole. I mean, I can blacklist this mining contract.
Yeah, I mean, it's still whack-a-mole on the contract level, but the current whack situation is whack-a-mole on accounts, not whack. We know which contracts. There's only a small number of contracts. Isn't that the case?
Well, that's only because we can't stop them. I think the contracts are more expensive than the accounts. That's why I say is if you can start maybe targeting those contract accounts underneath, or stop chasing the moles and try to pick up the pattern. I don't know. Yes, it's got pros and cons. I don't know. But as an optional, at least it gives you the ability to be like, all right, all hell's breaking loose. Start getting mad at people asserting. I mean, start blocking the contracts that are just blatantly getting abused, to at least allow 99% of the rest of the network to operate through that relay node. It doesn't cripple it across the board.
I have a question. Why are we blocking contracts and not blocking the accounts that are signing the transactions that fail.
That's what we do right now. They're just whack-a-mole.
There's
They
even
just
more.
brrrring.
Okay, because I got the impression that it was the contract that was getting blacklisted because
No, we were talking about potentially adding a new feature that would do that. Although I from this conversation, I'm
Right.
not liking the sound of that at all, actually.
John, to fill you in on that, we do when we have issues like with a bad actor exploiting a particular contract, either malicious or not malicious contract, we as node operators do blacklist accounts to at least stop the bleeding until, you know, we can figure out what's going on. But it's
Or
more
we
of
can
a
blacklist in a contract. I've done that before too.
Yeah, that's
correct.
That's what's happening. Yeah.
Correct.
a suggestion for the subjective billing. I mean, I think like most blockchains, they put the transactions in a mempool. If the transaction fails, the user still has to pay the transaction fee for that failed transaction, which goes on chain. So like, it seems like we don't want to do that. So we're going to have this off-chain subjective billing solution as an alternative. If we're going to rely on this off-chain subjective billing solution, then in my opinion, it needs to be broken out into its own separate service. Maybe it's a plugin, or maybe it's even an entire separate executable that Node.EOS talks to. The reason is because it doesn't make any sense for each individual node to be tracking the subjective billing, because when I'm talking to an API, any public API is going to have many individual nodes behind it that have their own individual subjective billing. So like I might push an action and get subjectively blocked by one, and then I push another action and I don't get subjectively blocked because I just round robined into another node that hadn't blocked me. So this leads to like a very bad user experience. Like, for example, like the EOS Power Up contract, sometimes I need to go in and manually make some transfers. And you would be surprised, about 50% of the time I can't, even if the contract has CPU, because whatever particular node I'm talking to behind a proxy has subjectively blocked it, because there's just so many actions that happen on that contract.
It's even farther than that. We've got our relay nodes behind them. So you may bounce in through different APIs and get one and not the other, but then they both feed into a central relay node, and it's obviously counting everything, but you didn't get a failure. It just didn't go all the way down the pipe. So yes, exactly what you're describing.
Exactly.
But even worse.
So like, for example, like in Ethereum, like if you push a transaction, you can sit there and watch it in the mempool until someone picks it and puts it in a block. So you don't care, like whatever node you originally sent it to, it doesn't really matter, because as long as you can see it in the mempool, that means many nodes on the network see it and are, you know, speculatively going to include it in the next block, you know, whatever the miner decides to do, right? But there's no visibility for us because we don't have this kind of cache or, you know, secondary service where the transactions live. And also like some ability for the user to see what is the subjective billing status of my account, like when sending. Maybe that was added and I missed that, but is there some way for me to see the status of my subjective billing, you know, status on a particular node, so that I know what's happening when I put transaction?
Get account reports that now.
Okay, cool, got it. So, but yeah, I really I really think if we're going to have this subjective billing thing, it needs to be its own process. It needs to be broken out from inside Node.EOS, where we have this like it's like we have this very rudimentary solution for something which is extremely important and really like needs to have a lot of options and a lot of customizability.
No, I think that's an excellent point, you know, and it bleeds into the resource model discussion. You know, subjective billing, I don't think is our end game. It's it's where we are today.
Yeah, and so John, I would go back to your first comment, which is, since we don't bill for failed transactions, well, maybe we should bill for failed transactions, which is part of that resource model discussion, I think. So I think that discussion about billing for failed transactions should be on the table. We just don't have the right people in this meeting right now to discuss it, so we'll discuss it at some meeting in early next year.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that the idea that you could even bill for failed transactions on a per node basis subjectively. For example, I deposit some transaction fees into Michael's EOS USA transaction pool, and if I send failed transaction to Michael, he takes some bit from that pool. And obviously you have to trust the node operator in this instance. But if you trust the node operator and you're a good actor, it's basically you're putting up a bond, so to say, so that you can get reliable transactions pushed through. And if you don't put up that bond, then his node can just safely ignore any transactions that you push through. And this could be done, by projects on behalf of their users also.
So that sounds like resource model. Maybe we save that for the when we get to that topic.
Yeah, those very things have been discussed and is part of what REG has been looking at. So yeah, I mean, it's good discussion. It's exactly, I think, where ultimately we have to move this conversation to in terms of addressing these sorts of issues.
I captured part of this advice for Wax Node Operator. Make sure you have suggested billing turned on for which node did we?
Sentry nodes or transaction.
Or just period. I mean,
I was about to say, which ones would you
All
not
nodes.
when you're having problems?
All nodes?
Unless you have to. Like, I can tell you this, I have to run some of my nodes without subjective billing on because the services are designed to pepper. And that's what I'm trying to think, I mean, as I start to mix and mesh all the nodes together, I mean, I try to keep them from being able to bleed their way around. But, I mean, there are situations like even a Boyd or Liquid Apps or any of those where you almost do need the ability to disable that. But I almost say that's a private node operator agreement or setup versus the default public model.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely for public nodes for sure. Yeah, if you're running a private node for somebody or for yourself, then particularly for yourself, there's no reason.
Well, if you need that, if you need it not to subjectively bill, I mean,
yeah. But of course, as we've discussed, just because the node you're talking to doesn't subjectively bill doesn't have anything say on what the rest of the network does. So your transaction still may not make it into a block.
Correct. That's why I may send it down to Nations Relayer, and I can tell you they're going to go sit on the curb if you send it down that pipe. It's got 18 different nodes that are going to century it out. So,
yeah. All right. I think are we done on this topic of advice for our discussion about WAC's current situation and advice for operators? It feels like we've got through all
covered a good amount.
on the table.
Sounds good. So again, more discussion to have on resource model. Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe that's what we can plan for now. If we are indeed, unless there's any final thoughts on configuration, leap changes. I think that's it. So who do we, I guess, as a starting point, who do we need to participate?
Well, REG doesn't happen without REG. So
REG,
not sure who else, but that's a minimum requirement.
Basically, he's without REG, no point. And everyone else is I spelled that right?
Yep.
Yes.
A lot of it is also gathering our thoughts prior to doing it's not really a public discussion type of thought process. Like, so everybody who would be invited as a sort of key opinion leader, you know, write down things. We start with a document, start with, you know, a written form. So that way kind of the ideas can kind of be written down on paper and not just discuss verbally, you know, brainstorming. So, but once we get to that, you know, those written down ideas and we've kind of really fleshed it out, then we can have the sort of public debate on a few little topics that are more, you know, harder to discuss. But a lot of prep needs to happen before we just jump into a meeting, because then we'll just be running around in circles. So I think Arig can probably take that lead if he's up for it, if he has good capacity, and then we can kind of flesh out some of the additional ideas around it. But there's a lot to do in that, especially if we kind of start with a fresh mindset on what we could do. There's a lot of opportunities to improve the current system and not just try to find a patch for a current thing. So,
yeah. And is this a public conversation, or is this a conversation that needs to happen?
Once it's fleshed out, I think it could be a public conversation. It just, we need to figure out what the direction is before, and it's probably not going to be public forum is probably not the best choice for fleshing out really like those ideas.
There's a 1,000 ideas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's way too many ideas. So let's flesh it out first, and then once it's kind of a little bit more in a more mature state, then we can have the sort of a public forum to discuss the general direction, you know, still not final, but.
Right. So we want sort of a proposal first from someone like Areg, and then we can provide feedback as node operators on that direction that's being proposed.
A bunch of proposals.
Yeah, it would be,
or a bunch of
proposals, A, proposal B, proposal C, option 1, 2, 3. There could be a lot of paths and a lot of avenues we can take. What are the pros and cons, and you know, so I would see a lot of different routes we can take. So this would need to be kind of drafted prior to even having a public discussion, and
probably want to pass that around to the attendees in advance. People can think about it, come prepared with some feedback, and then we can get on a call, ask questions, give feedback.
So quick thought from my end. I'm very conscious of the fact that Areg, quite frankly, is one of the more oversubscribed people right now, just in terms of his capacity. And I absolutely don't feel comfortable telling him that we gave him this on a call he couldn't make it to. So one thing that I might
coordinate a new resource model for the entire ecosystem over Christmas.
What kind of a project manager are you, Stephen?
I'll tell you one thing, I'm not a project manager, I'm a product manager.
Sorry.
Like you care. You sound like you care. What's wrong?
It's okay, but let me actually insert my influence from that product direction and say that I think a more productive discussion we could have that doesn't lean so heavily on Areg and kind of makes it this more natural discourse between you know, the ENF and all of these stakeholders, is having a broader discussion to aggregate all of these problems that people are facing, right? We need to start with understanding these problems to understand where we really want to address and prioritize, and pull together that more holistic perspective about what all you guys are running into. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a massive amount of overlap, but that's the sort of validation that we'd want. And what that does is it equips us with something much more bulky to start with and tangible that somebody like Areg may be able to propose solutions for without as much overhead dumped directly on him or whomever else may come along and try and respond to how we might solve some of these problems. So that might just be a good way to get everybody primed and talking. I also think that that's probably not a great public discussion either, if we're talking about all the places where these things are going wrong. But that was just like a proposal I wanted to throw out here while we've got everybody together.
Yeah, and I think right now Brian from ENF is taking on that lead of kind of getting the questions, getting the feedback from the community. So maybe if Daniel, you want to put in like Brian as the sort of data aggregator from the community feedback, and then we can kind of like help support all the community feedback ideas. So I've given my 2 cents to Brian, whether that goes in, fine. But I think Brian is taking the lead on doing that aggregation. So Brian from ENF.
Is it fair to volunteer Brian while he's not
He's already
here?
Well,
doing
he's sick. He got sick and
doing
didn't
it.
show up.
We're volunteering. Yeah.
I think in this scenario, since Brian is actively working on this, that it's maybe less problematic. I know this is being recorded, but I'll maybe I can chat with Brian and talk to him about where he's at. I think he's sick as a dog right now. I'm like not getting responses from him, so I feel bad for the guy. But I think that Denis is correct that he has been working on this to some extent in the background. This is going to be a thing that happens next year at this point, right? This discussion. So we have a little bit of time to get our ducks in a row. But I think that Brian is actively working on some of this.
Yeah,
And I would be, sorry, go ahead.
Brian's running 103-degree temperature today, so he is down for the count.
Hope he feels better. So yeah, we got a couple weeks off. Hopefully that's enough time for him to recover, and we can check in the new year, see how that's going. I'm happy to let him lead that discussion. I think he's probably better positioned to do an effective job leading that discussion. So I'm happy to take a back seat. And get the Zoom up and running, participate as much as I can, but take more of a back seat on that.
Yeah, so it sounds like the action item really is that the action item can be Daniel, you, Brian, and I, when he's back in good health, can coordinate and identify when best to schedule this meeting so that we can set the context and make sure everybody's aligned about when it's happening. And we can just commit on a date that's realistic when we can announce this. But you know, we can do the facilitation and organization, and then the people who have these needs and problems can show up and communicate them, and maybe we can even request that they document some of that more comprehensively, as was mentioned in the meeting earlier, in advance.
Sounds like a good action item. Okay. Anything? We're right at the hour now. I think it's a good point to end it. So happy New Year, everybody. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, all that stuff. And thanks. And we'll see you guys all in the new year.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.
Speak to you
Thanks.
all on the line.